Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and Bulldogs everywhere, and welcome back to another weekly episode of the Butler Sports Report presented by the Butler Collegian. I'm Jake Bedell.
I'm Jack Jankowski.
As the fall athletic season is winding down, we are still seeing some teams in the running for some postseason hardware, but we also see some of the winter programs starting up, which is creating a lot of action around the Butler community. Jack, what can you tell us?
Yeah, well, let's start with a season that's starting up, and that's basketball season. The men's basketball team had their second and final preseason game on Saturday. They beat Southern Indiana 79-58. It was a slow start for the Bulldogs, but Paul Jorgensen had a team high and career high 24 points. Joey Brunk came off the bench, got 14 points and a team high 7 rebounds, and the Bulldogs won the turnover battle 22-7. So a lot of good notes for the Bulldogs this time around.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're going to hope that this translates into their start of their regular season. They're going to start it off this upcoming Saturday against Miami of Ohio. The tip-off is at 7 p.m. The boys have put in some hard work in their preseason practices and these first two exhibition games, so I think a lot of people are really excited for this upcoming season. Hopefully they'll be able to see some success as to the start of the non-conference schedule, and hopefully by the start of the conference schedule, they'll see themselves inside that top 25 ranking for the NCAA.
Absolutely. Moving on to women's soccer, they're one of those teams that are finishing up their fall season. They are in the playoffs, and they won 3-2 over Providence in the semifinal of the Big East tournament. They now get Georgetown in the final. In the game against Providence, goals from Hallie Stilbaski, she had 2 in the game, and Annika Schmidt led the team, as well as a strong first half where they scored 2 goals on 10 shots. So really starting out strong, continuing to play great soccer throughout the game. Great game for the women's soccer team.
Yeah, absolutely. And that game is going to lead them to the Big East Championship that takes place later on this afternoon against number 1 seed Georgetown. This is another matchup that we saw last year in the finals. It is a rematch of the 2017 Big East final. In that game, the Bulldogs unfortunately lost 3-0 against the Hoyas, but it's a brand new team. It's a brand new year. They've had the entire season to work really hard for the success that they've seen so far. They've had the back and support of the entire school behind them. So now they just need to make that final push to hopefully bring out a win today. If they do so, they will get an automatic bid into the NCAA tournament. And in the case that they lose, it will be up to the NCAA D1 Women's Selection Committee to determine whether or not they get into that 64 teams that are allowed into that tournament. So hopefully they get that opportunity.
Yeah, and you're talking about them playing this Georgetown team, just last year, but this is a very different Butler team. I mean, they have some phenomenal freshmen that are playing at a really high level. Very different team. Hopefully a very different result.
Yeah, definitely. I really like the way that they've played over the course of this year.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to football, and if you love defense, you might want to look away and avert your gaze for this one, as the football team lost to Jacksonville 48-44 in a shootout. Will Marty 425 yards through the air, whereas Pace Temple 196 receiving yards in the game to lead the Bulldogs, but it was a Calvin Turner Jacksonville touchdown, 3 yards into the end zone with 5 seconds left in the game in regulation to give Jacksonville the win.
Yeah, and the Bulldogs team is going to take on Stetson this upcoming Saturday for the senior day. The kickoff is at noon. Stetson sits at 7-1 overall and 5-1 in conference play, so this will be a tough matchup for the Bulldogs. They would really like to go out with a bang at home to honor the seniors with this win, but it's going to be tough to do so. Stetson is second in the league in total offense and in the passing efficiency, so they have the ability to throw the ball downfield, but they also have the running backs in order to hand the ball off and pick up some yards on the ground. So the Bulldogs are going to have their work cut out for them, but hopefully the motivation of it being senior day and the hard work that they put in over the course of this last year could potentially motivate them towards a win this upcoming Saturday.
Absolutely. What else do we have going around campus?
Well, men's tennis is going to be finishing up the final day of the Viking Invitational at Cleveland State later on this afternoon. The tournament began last Friday. Volleyball is going to take on Marquette here at home on Friday as well. Last time the two met, the Dogs unfortunately got swept on the road 3-0. That was when Marquette was sitting at number 19 in the country. Cross-country programs head to Terre Haute, Indiana to take part in the NCAA Great Lakes Invitational. And women's hoops tips off against Eastern Illinois for their first regular season matchup on Friday at noon. So if you're coming home from your morning classes, hopefully you can catch some of that game.
All right, that's all for us today. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Butler Sports Report, sponsored by the Butler Collegian. I'm Jack Jankowski.
I'm Jake Bedell.
You have a good one.